Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Klaidman, and I am really pleased to have the opportunity to interview Preet Bharara, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, sometimes known as the Sheriff of Albany and the Watchdog of Wall Street. And I gather the inspiration for this new Showtime drama that just started, a couple of weeks ago.
I think that's right.
So I got to start there. Preet, what's it like to be portrayed on television by Paul Giamatti?
I guess it's pretty cool. It's a highly fictionalized account. For those of you who have seen it, some of those things don't actually happen.
Well, there is the line about the 82 straight insider trader convictions, which is more or less true.
Right, it was true.
The dominatrix scene, not so much.
Correct. You're good, you're good.
But look, there actually is an interesting point here. I mean, there's a reason that your job gets the Hollywood treatment. And it's one of the few high-profile legal jobs that really captures the public's imagination. And you saw some of the words, you didn't see them, but the headlines that were up there, words associated with this job: brash, dangerous, white knight, headline grabbing. What is it about this job that makes it such an object of public fascination? And what is it about your upbringing, your personality, your values that made you really want this job?
Well, I think there's always been a fascination with justice. I mean, we're here for the Justice Summit. I think people care about how justice is meted out. I think they care about how people are treated in the system. They care about the stakes that are in play when crimes are committed and when people's liberty is at issue. And that's always been true. That's been true in Hollywood from the beginning. It's been true in human nature. And I think when you have the stakes that you have at play in a prosecutor's office and with defense and in a courtroom, that's compelling stuff. And our office, is fortunate to have on its docket some of the most interesting and cutting-edge cases that you have anywhere in the country. That was true long before I got there. It'll be true long after I leave. Whether you're talking about terrorism or cybercrime or Wall Street or corruption, those are some of the issues that people care about, and how they play out and who gets held accountable is, I think, compelling and interesting to people. Why I wanted to do it, I don't know that I ever aspired to have the job of the boss in the office, but from a fairly young time when I was in law school and even before, when I decided I wanted to be some kind of trial lawyer, I thought that the best way to serve would be to wake up every morning and do what the job requires in our office and in the Justice Department, and that is you aspire to do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons all the time. It doesn't always work out, and that's why you have summits like this, so we can re-examine the ways in which we go about doing that job. But I think there's no more exhilarating way to spend your time than to wake up every morning and only do the cases you think are good and righteous to do.
You have a reputation as a pretty aggressive and tough prosecutor, but I'm curious, before you took the job, did you anticipate the sort of depth of criminality and the kind of impunity of behavior that you found, and particularly among the sort of well-heeled, well-educated, people on Wall Street and in Albany, let's say?
I don't think you find it surprising. I had been a line prosecutor for 5 years in the office before, doing mostly mob cases, Russian organized crime and Italian organized crime. And you realize, if you pay attention in the world, that sometimes with a lot of power comes a lot of arrogance and comes a feeling that you can get away with it. And going back to your first question, one of the great things about our office is the level of independence it has and fearlessness that it has on the part of the career people who have been there for a long time. Is we don't care who you are, we don't care how big you are, we don't care how powerful you are, we don't care how much money you have, you're not above the law.
Well, I want to say on this a little bit, this sort of what you've learned about the human condition, because I know that you've had this running debate for years with your old friend, college friend, Viet Din, another esteemed lawyer. I covered him when he was in the Bush Justice Department. The debate over whether man is fundamentally good or fundamentally evil. And I think you took the sort of sunnier position over the years.
I was young. I was very young.
All right. So that's what I wanted to ask you about. So you've been doing this for, 7 years now? You're seeing the dark underside of a lot of things that are happening in this city. How has your view evolved on that fundamental question? Is it more complex than it was in those earlier years when you were debating Viet?
I think so. I mean, we see a lot of very terrible things every day. It's the nature of the job. It's the definition of the job. Terrorists who want to bring down our country, people who kill children, people who kill witnesses, people who steal from old people who don't have money. So there's a lot of evil. There's a lot of bad stuff. But I still think that I like to think that people are fundamentally good, that the things that inspire people are what's good in the world. And I often say about my office, in the face of all that bad stuff that the prosecutors and the agents have to deal with all the time, I mean, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of pain, a lot of death, a lot of destruction, that the nice thing to see in the midst of all that is how much they hold on to their idealism. And they think, well, if I do my job well, maybe we can do something about that. Maybe we can make the world a little bit better and the community a little bit safer. And that's a wonderful thing to see. I still do think, even if it may not be ultimately true, it is a better thing to believe that people are more good than they are evil.
Well, let's stick with the evil for a little bit.
Okay.
You generated a lot of your biggest headlines during corruption cases. And I'm curious, what makes a person corrupt? What's the essential ingredient, the sort of Achilles heel? What have you learned about that aspect of the human condition?
Yeah, so it's impossible to, I mean, people ask that question about Wall Street, they ask it about public corruption. You don't know. I mean, corruption comes in different stripes. So some people are just venal and they're born that way and they go into office thinking they want to rip off the people who elected them. Some people, after a period of time, feel like it's owed to them because they're not making the kind of money they thought they were going to make. So it's all different reasons. What I do think is true is that institutions have to be established in a way and have to be governed in a way and have to have a certain kind of culture that brings out the best in people and doesn't allow, as much as some places do, people to get away with bad things. I mean, cultures matter. There's more corruption in certain firms on Wall Street than others. There's more corruption in certain state capitals than in others. And what's the difference? It's the same job. And I think a lot of that has to do with culture, a culture in which you police yourself, a culture in which people who think that bad things are going on come forward and say something instead of being afraid and watch it happen in silence. That's true whether you're talking about a hedge fund, it's true whether you're talking about a legislature, it's true whether you're talking about a university like Penn State. Good people have to come forward. And so when I talk to audiences about the issue of how you make places better, I often say, I'm directing my words to the ears not of the 2 or 3 people in the room who are statistically speaking likely to commit serious crimes in the future, although I know who you are.
And you've got subpoenas with you.
Yeah, well, I got guys outside. It's more to direct my words to the ears of the vast majority of people in any room you enter who are good and honest and honorable and have integrity, who you hope will do something when they see bad things happen. I mean, all these cases, some of which were cited to, whether it's the Madoff case or the Galleon case, lots of bad things could have been solved and stanched, and a lot of pain could have been prevented and avoided if forget about the bad people, the evil people, but if the good people had done something about it. By the time the FBI agents show up and the prosecutors show up, the place is already on the verge of burning down. And so the lesson for me when we're talking about justice generally, whether you're talking about Rikers Island or some of the other issues that I heard about from the earlier panel, you have to have the good people at the place do something about it and have the courage to come forward.
Well, I want to get to that issue of how you change the culture and what role you could play in that. But before that, you called Albany a cauldron of corruption.
I said that?
You did. So can you talk in concrete terms, as vividly as you can, about how this kind of behavior impacts the lives of ordinary people? Why should people care? And to what extent does it corrode our democracy?
People should. I spend a lot of time talking about why, why people should care. Legislators actually matter, and some of them are not known, and their faces are not familiar to everyone. But state legislatures, whether it's in New York or it's in Kentucky, where I spoke recently, they decide often what kind of taxes you pay. They decide how your children are educated. They decide what is a crime, what is not. They decide things like what bail reform should look like or not look like. A lot of the issues that you care about in this room are decided by these people who are elected to serve in Albany and in other state legislatures around the country. And so it's a very pragmatic, practical matter. If you have people there who are on the take And if you have people there who are in a system that is rigged, then you're not getting the benefit of your vote, and you're not getting the best results that you could possibly get. And we have a case, we have charged, I think, a dozen state legislators, and there was a time, it might still be true, when you're more likely to be indicted as a state senator in New York than be turned away, than be defeated at the polls. Now, that's a culture problem that has real effects on everyday people, separate and apart from the policies that they put in place, which may be done for corrupt reasons and may be done for the special interests and the people who have money or whatever the other causes might be. Separate and apart from that, I think it otherwise undermines people's faith in democracy. It makes people turn away in disgust. It makes people not want to go into public service. It makes people think they can't do anything about the system. And I think you get a cycle of corrosiveness that happens, as has happened in Albany for a period of time, and that's not a good thing for anybody.
A little earlier in the green room, you were talking about how in some of these big cases, you actually have had a pretty hands-on role. Obviously, you're going to the court, you're going to the trial, but you're also examining the evidence ahead of time. Take us behind the scenes as you listen to the evidence in, say, one of these big corruption cases. Was there a kind of let's say you're listening to wiretaps? You know, is there an aha moment when you realize, you know, we're not just talking about some bad apples here. We're talking about a fundamental, like deeply rooted culture of corruption. And was there anything that sort of sickened you the most as you were kind of listening to the evidence?
It takes a lot to sicken me. I have a very strong stomach. Yeah, I don't know if there was an aha moment. And cases of that significance and complexity are built up by the amazing prosecutors in my office. I didn't build those cases up. I mean, they brief me on things on a regular basis. But there were moments when you thought, well, I think we're on the right track here. For example, we were on court-authorized wiretaps with respect to the Senate Majority Leader's son, who was convicted, and the Senate Majority Leader and his son, who were both convicted at trial last month. And there was a moment when, and the wiretap call was sent to me, and it was played in open court, so I'm not saying anything that's secret, where the son was talking to the father, who was the Senate Majority Leader at the time, and complaining about the heat that had been reportedly brought to bear on the part of the feds, which I guess was us. And he says on the wiretap call, you know, it's really frustrating, Dad. It's getting really hard to talk to you. It's like effing Preet Bharara is listening to every effing phone call. So that was a moment that was interesting, like including that one. Yeah.
Well, let's talk quickly about how you change the culture, because ultimately you can't do it solely through prosecutions, right?
I don't think you can solve. I mean, one thing that I presume you're going to be talking about all day today is you can't solve anything that's fundamentally important through prosecution. You know, I think the people in my office have an important job, but it's a blunt instrument, prosecution. You can't solve the problems in prisons. You can't solve the problem of corruption. You can't solve the problem of drugs. You can't solve the problem of corruption on Wall Street by prosecutions. That's one part of the puzzle. You want to hold people accountable, and you want people to understand that there's a cop on the beat, and so if you cross the line into illegality, you could go to prison, and hopefully that deters people. But with respect to corruption, for example, there's a role for the politicians themselves. I mean, any institution is best fixed and is most likely to have a good culture if it polices itself. That's true, again, of a school, it's true of a hedge fund, it's true of a legislature. And there's been precious little self-policing going on in Albany by every account. So separate and apart from them, there's a role for the press to play and to do a better job of investigative journalism. And we read the papers, and some of the cases we bring, we bring because we've read about something that an enterprising reporter has brought to light, and then we investigate it also. And then finally, it's really up to the people, I think, and that's true for a lot of things. I mean, it's the people who put those people in office, and I think they have to demand more of those folks. And when there are scandals or there's evidence of people not, following their oath, people have to get mad and angry and upset about that for all the reasons I mentioned before, because they have a real effect on people's lives and livelihoods in ways that affect them.
So a question you get asked a lot is why none of the big fish went to prison after their role in the financial collapse. Because for the average man on the street, they can't fathom it. I mean, the amount of destruction and harm that was done to people's lives, how could there not be that kind of accountability? The people responsible would really pay for it. Is it because there was no criminal behavior? Is it because there was criminal behavior, but you all couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And does that suggest there's something wrong with the system or something right with the system?
Those are a lot of complicated questions. I think that I do get the question a lot, and it's an important question. It's a question we ask ourselves. And the first thing I think people should understand and know is that there was no one more disgusted and upset and affected by the financial crisis than the flesh and blood career prosecutors and agents in my own office. I mean, before we are prosecutors, we are citizens, and we have families, and we have 401k plans also. So, people worked and work really hard to hold people accountable because that's their job, but also when you're yourself a victim of a bad thing that happened, like everyone was a victim of the financial crisis, that gives you even more incentive to work as hard as you can. As has been said, and I hope people appreciate, I think our office is as aggressive as any in the country. Some people think overly aggressive on financial crime or otherwise. And if there was, we didn't look at everything there was to look at. Various offices looked at different things. But to the extent there was anything to be done as far as arrests of the type you're talking about, if there were cases that we could have brought and proven, we would have done it. We had the will to do it. We had the expertise to do it. We had the effort was made to do it. Now, it's a combination of two things, I think. Sometimes there are complicated things that cause bad things to happen, and there was bad behavior and misconduct and recklessness that doesn't always rise to the level of a crime. And in other cases, but it's hard to know, perhaps there were crimes committed, but you don't have the evidence. There's lots of people who get away with crimes.
All right. Well, let me follow up on that point. Because there were crimes committed, but you couldn't prove them. If you could go back in time, say it's January 2009, and with the benefit of all the experience your office has had and the knowledge that you have over the last 7 years, is there anything you would do differently? I mean, would you bring more resources to bear? Would you use more wiretaps? I mean, what would you do differently if the same kind of activity was taking place?
I don't think there was a failure of resources there or a failure of will. I wasn't there at the Justice. I mean, I joined the office much later, and again, I'm one office, and decisions were made about who would look at which bad things that arose from the financial crisis. And maybe it's possible that someone, taking a step back, maybe someone should ask that question later in the day if an individual is coming. But I think that the people in my office worked as hard as they could to try to see if there was a crime based on the things that they were looking at. I mean, look. Part of the problem was when you look carefully at some of the representations made with respect to securitization, not to get deep in the weeds for too long, you had outside lawyers and accountants who were giving them basically blessings to make certain levels of representation. And it's very hard when you talk about the criminal justice system and what you have to prove and how easy it is for prosecutors to put people in prison, there's a reason that it is as hard as it is when you're talking about the mental state of a person. You have to be able to prove that the person at the head of the bank or the head of an organized crime family actually ordered the thing to be done. It can't be done by innuendo. It can't be done by speculation. And sometimes if you don't have the wiretap, in the case we were talking about before, if we didn't have the wiretaps with respect to the Senate Majority Leader, I'm not sure that we would have been able to make that case. The crime was committed, and we were fortunate enough, and I had really, really wily people in my office who were smart enough to figure out how to get the court-authorized wiretap. But in some things in connection with the financial crisis, I think there's not the evidence to have brought the cases that some people thought should have been brought.
Okay, so time is running out, so we're going to do the lightning round now.
Okay.
I want to ask you very quickly about your public role as U.S. Attorney, because you've got some criticism for being a grandstander. There was a federal judge who said, some of your public comments, you ought to be trying cases in the courtroom, not on the press.
Yeah, we do
quickly,
that. We do that too. I think it is ridiculous that a district attorney or a United States attorney who has learned something about what the root causes of crime might be and how culture might be affected based on the cases that are brought doesn't say something publicly about it. I was invited here for a reason, presumably, and that's to talk about those things. And the prosecutor's job, going back to the overall issue of how you make the world better and how you make the country and the community better, is not just to prosecute, but also to prevent and also to educate. So whether you're talking about the prescription pill and heroin problem that is rampant everywhere in the country and especially here in New York, it is important for public officials to talk about why that's a problem. It's important to talk about how you can improve culture on Wall Street. It's important to talk about how you can improve culture in Albany as well. And I'm going to keep talking about it because it's the right thing to do.
Let's do quickly cybercrime and then terrorism in 35 seconds. Cybercrime.
That's the right amount of time for that.
Why are those cases? Why those cases are real challenges for you, aren't they?
They are. So quickly, speed talk. Cybercrime is really hard because not only do you have to prove a crime was committed, that bad guys somewhere infiltrated servers in a computer system and took customer data out, or stole trade secrets or stole intellectual property, you have to prove who did it. And most of the time, it's from somewhere outside the country. Often it's a nation state, really, really sophisticated people, and you have to connect those things. And that, it doubles or triples the level of difficulty sometimes when you're talking about proving cybercrime.
Terrorism, New York, ISIS is still on the minds of a lot of people. New York, what's the biggest threat right now in this city? And to what extent is New York still the biggest target?
I think New York always remains the biggest target in the world for a lot of reasons, because people want to take us down, and we always have to be vigilant about it. I think the lone wolf issue, the ISIS issue, FBI Director Jim Comey talks about it all the time. It was once upon a time, I think people were a little bit more sanguine about being able to know that people who were doing bad things were trained abroad in Afghanistan or somewhere else, and you might get a tripwire that they would hit, and you would know that people were buying certain kinds of things or training in certain places or having certain kinds of communications. You don't know if you're going to find that out this time around, and so it's a much harder thing to probe.
I want to ask you a question about something that's near and dear to my heart. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, he was supposed to be tried in your courthouse, by your office in New York City in civilian court. New York politicians essentially pressured the Justice Department to change that. It went back into the military system, and it's now been 15 years since Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has been, he has been tried in 15 years. What do you say to the victims, most of whom reside in your jurisdiction, the relatives of the victims, for not getting justice?
Yeah, I say I'm sorry that you haven't gotten justice yet. Another good question for Mr. Holder, who's coming later. It was 6.5 years ago that he called me in November of 2009 and said that your office will be prosecuting Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And then obviously for reasons that you describe and other reasons, that didn't end up happening, and he remains in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. In those 6.5 years, my office and the great career prosecutors in my office with the Joint Terrorism Task Force have convicted terrorist after terrorist after terrorist, including Osama bin Laden's son-in-law and a whole host of other people who were involved in acts of tremendous violence, killing Americans over and over and over again, while I think Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is awaiting his first pretrial conference or something like that. And it's unfortunate that that's the case, but I hope that I know you care about this and you've written a great book about it. I hope that part of the legacy of the last several years after the controversy surrounding the decision about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is that quietly and with the track record of my office and others, that we have been able to prove that the Article 3 civilian justice system is the best in the world. We should be incredibly, notwithstanding the problems that it has, we should focus on and try to reform, but it's the best in the world, and it shows everyone that all of these bad things people thought would arise if we tried terrorists in a local court in New York didn't come to pass, and may not have come to pass had we tried Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as well.
Would you be willing to consider serving as Hillary Clinton's Attorney General if she becomes president?
I'll wait till that happens.
Are you running for governor?
I am not.
Okay.
Anything else? All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.